Hi, I'm Jake.
And I'm Steven.
Welcome to Tales from the SaaS Graveyard, where we talk to employees at tech companies that are in the middle of the bell curve, not going out of business, but definitely not hitting the big time. The SaaS Graveyard is a purgatory populated by companies that have made it to annual revenues in the 30 to 50 million range but can't get to the next level, which is pretty impressive outside of Silicon Valley, but frowned upon here.
We interview folks in various roles about their experience working at companies like this. We're looking to see what common themes emerge across industries and roles. Today, we will spend time with our friend Al, who will talk about his time working on infrastructure at a company we will call GTSI that built technology for large and complex systems. Before we talk to Al, Jake, do you understand what infrastructure at a company that builds technology for large complex systems means?
So I understand each of the words individually, but I have no idea what they mean when you string them together like that.
Yeah, so the way I think about it, which is very similar to kind of how we think about DevOps today, which is another occupation that I know I am also very confused about. I imagine you're confused about it as well. But what I imagine is for the infrastructure folks, since Al worked at GTSI back in 2009, before all the cloud providers for hosting were well known and kind of the de facto standard, is the person who had to manage all the servers also had to deal with the physical servers themselves of actually maintaining and making sure they're up and running at the end of the day, as well as along with the software on said servers.
Again, I'm understanding a lot of the words you're saying, but I really don't understand what any of them mean. And this kind of goes along with, over the years I've worked with a lot of DevOps folks, and they're always kind of like the cool cousins of the engineering department. Like they're always super friendly, always willing to help out. If you have a conversation with them about things outside of work, they usually have very interesting takes on things. But for the most part, I never understand a single thing that they're talking about, and I just pretty much nod and hope they don't realize that I'm an idiot, and that's been my experience working with DevOps folks over the years. Have you had any better luck?
Well, Jake, I think your experience with DevOps folks aligns with mine. I always feel like they are definitely the cool cousin of the engineering team. Of traditionally engineers are usually they say they don't like to work with people, and usually they have a bad rap about not really wanting to help people or not technical in some ways. We're definitely DevOps people, although you might not understand what they're saying. They do desperately want to help you out and help you get your job done, which I really appreciate about DevOps folks and infrastructure engineering. I think the one funny story I have about infrastructure is I was at a company and the DevOps lead was presenting about how he made this change to their cloud hosting provider and it was going to save the company 60 grand from their current bill to the next year. So like a 50% decrease in cost. And then I asked him after the meeting, so why was cost so high in the first place? And he said it was a mistake that he made earlier this year, which is why it was so high. So I appreciate his honesty and I appreciate he's able to take his job and actually prove hard value in that way, which I think was pretty funny. And he also recognized how funny that was, which I think
But,
speaks to how friendly DevOps folks are.
but you were probably the only person in the company who realized that it meant that he had made a mistake earlier, and that's the beauty of DevOps. Like no one has any idea what they're doing. They could be costing the company millions of dollars, and no one would know. And then they say, "Oh, look, I saved us millions of dollars," and they're heroes.
Amazing. I wish I was able to provide that at every job I worked at for any mistake I made. Yeah, no, it's funny how DevOps, they have such hard values that they can focus on of like they truly know the cost every month of how much the servers are, and they can look at optimizing those values or correcting mistakes they've made in the past. Where very few jobs offer that level of cost management that's very much you can turn the dials and actually see the direct result the next month because there's less fuzzy people involved or people problems. It's very just hard technology and software that you can fine tune, which I have to imagine is very satisfying for them.
I think that's a good point because, like in product management, you have to, you release some feature, and then maybe 6 months later it leads to some sales. But it's very difficult to tie what you've done with the growth of the company, and so it's very difficult to put any revenue around what you're actually doing. So that must be a very fulfilling part for DevOps folks that they can have that connection. And with that, Al, welcome to the SaaS Graveyard.
You're welcome. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. So before we get into your time at GTSI, can you tell us a little bit about your career leading up to that point?
Sure. I had been working for about 10 years in litigation support, so a little bit different than pure technology, but we were doing technology services for, all kinds of other thing of all kinds of companies and corporate legal teams and state agencies, Department of Justice. So it was a big shift to go into a startup life. It was really fun, and I met a lot of great people.
Did you decide to leave and go to GTSI specifically, or were you just looking for a change in career broadly?
No, it was really by choice. It was mostly by this was 2008, September to December 2008 timeframes. So all of the companies that had kind of acquired and done these leverage buyouts were at the place that I was at kind of went up in a big dumpster fire. So I had to find a new place to work and pretty quickly. And the first places to actually start hiring well at that time were startups. So that's what I chose to go for.
How specifically did you first hear of GTSI?
Craigslist, actually, that was a time that Craigslist was a pretty reliable way to find opportunities.
When you started, reaching out in the interview process, what were your first impressions of the company?
My first impression was that there were a lot of very smart people who knew a lot about the different aspects of hardware and software, and so the kind of technology solutions that they were building kind of encompassed a wide swath of different technologies and kind of studies of science, math, and other things that I was interested in.
Okay, and what exactly was the interview process? Did you meet with a lot of people, or just one or two?
It was two people. So there had been somebody that had been working as a contractor, and so I had interviewed with the contractor, and then another one of the founders that I would be trying to take their workload from. So that was really it, pretty much it.
And was it then a pretty easy process just going through two people, or were they difficult questions?
Um, the contractor, they I was pretty comfortable with all of the other things but the founder, he was really smart. And so he was also very humble. And so it was actually really great, but he asked me a lot of hard questions. So although I felt like he was really just kind of seeing, the extent of my knowledge. So, but in a really not conflicting or kind of, accusatory way, but just kind of a way of like, what can we depend on from you? And so I thought it was, although it was hard, it was a lot of because they were doing so many things. They were trying to just place people and so that they could, get them the most of their strengths.
When you were interviewing with them, were there other companies you were interviewing at the same time?
Oh yeah, I think there were two other places that I'd been interviewing.
And when you finally made the decision to go with GTSI, what made you more excited about that than the other opportunities?
The amount of technologies that I was being able to touch and play with on an everyday level.
So just like the overall the learning opportunities.
Yeah, yeah, because they were not only doing real hardware solutions, but they were doing quite a few different builds or a few different boards and put ups for the technology solution that they were building.
Now, so in the interview process, is there anything that you wish you had asked to know more about the company before you'd started?
Yeah, a bit more, and of course, this is advice for every company, and that's if you get benefits, if you get shares of a company, just with any of those agreements, have get good legal representation who can really give you the ins and outs of what those, what any of those benefits mean for you, for your taxes, and for in the event that things happen in the company, whether they're being sold, acquired, whatever happens. But really getting an idea of if you're given shares or options or any other benefits by a company, just make sure that you understand what those things are. And that was something that I didn't understand at the time, and I kind of got my misunderstanding, kind of left me with in a not a bad financial decision, but I could have made a much better financial decision for myself with more insight.
Right, like when you get the offer, it's sort of like, well, that's so far off in the distance, and they give you this number that you're going to get 10,000 options or shares or RSUs, and you just sort of think like in your mind, at least in my mind, I would think, well, that means if this company makes good, then I'm going to get some piece of it. But I never dig in either to see like what does this actually mean? Like, if we got sold for X million, what is my share of that going to be? And I think, like what you just said, like I never do that homework to find out what does this really mean. So you accept the job, and part of it, you said, you had to look for a job just due to the state of the economy at the time, but you were also very excited for like learning all these new things. What can you describe sort of your first month and just sort of what you were learning, what you were doing?
Yeah, so they were kind of really trying to home grow a really kind of enterprise solution for a very complicated piece of technology. And so I was really helping set up a lot of the infrastructure parts of that. So but with as little shoestring as possible. So I was setting up major parts of networks and compute infrastructure with a shoestring in a closet. So it was really fun to get really amazing numbers and some really big compute things together on a small little budget, and also run them in a closet. But there's a flip side of that. That's everything is so unreliable, and when people are actually depending on these systems, it makes your job as a infrastructure engineer kind of much more of a challenge to maintain a reliable system when within data centers and other things, they have all of backup power supplies and generators and air conditioning, HVAC systems and all of that. And, a closet has none of that. So all of that reliability you have to kind of build in yourself, which is an interesting challenge, especially with, as little money as possible. So those were the kinds of things that I was doing in my first month. And,
And,
I was just trying to get it all set up and, reliable, and try to help all of the engineers be most effective.
and in that first month, did you have much guidance? It's a small start, or did you pretty much have to figure out everything on your own?
There was a fair amount of guidance as far as like, here are the projects that we need help with, but then how to solve them. I was given quite amount of, creativity. And of course I would want to, I would talk to, because I was reporting directly to one of the founders. So, I would just, go over, here's my, brief overview of a plan, we'd talk about it. And then I was left to, pretty much go and do as, as needed. So I was given a lot of, freedom. So it was a really, great setup as far as, working and then learning from some really smart people.
It sounds that that first month, then it sort of lived up to what your vision was when you accepted the offer. Were there any things that gave you pause or any kind of red flags that you saw in that first month?
I should have just asked a few more questions about the structure of the company. How many founders are there? Ways that the company is structured, like LLC, C corp, all of just those, a little bit of those details to help you who the founder is. Because actually, I met a founder, and I felt so embarrassed because I say he walks up to my desk and he says, hello, and I say hi. What do you do here? And he's the founder. I felt I wanted to crawl out of my skin, right?
So, how many founders were there then?
There were three.
There's the one you'd met on the interview, and that was the one that you were sort of reporting to, and then there were these two others, one who you met after a few weeks on the job.
Yep, yep.
Did he take that good naturedly, or
Oh
did
yeah,
he?
everyone was very, good natured about the whole thing, but
I think one thing I just want to clarify: are we talking about a literal closet, Al?
yeah.
That's great. I love it. I just want to clarify that for some of our listeners on whether that was a metaphor or whether we're talking about a real closet.
No,
That,
yeah. Putting lots of infrastructure in a small closet leads to some interesting problems.
Just with heat, or
With heat specifically, yeah. I had a small air conditioner unit ice up in the middle of winter.
hey, I'm sure the air conditioning company appreciated the sale.
Home Depot loved the additional sale of the $179 window unit that I went and picked up and replaced it with.
So of course we had, getting the infrastructure set up in the closet. Can you tell us more of kind of like after that fact, you were there for several years. How did your workday change? Was it just always dealing with this closet situation, or did your role expand, or did you focus on other things as
Oh yeah,
well?
there was lots of other technology solutions that I had to get, kind of help with. There was, we were supplying, all kinds of technology solutions to a number of other, kind of downstream, and they were using this technology in the field. So there were, return RMA units. So there were some returns merchandise that we had to go through, test, fix up. And then there was some, research and development of some of the other things that we were integrating. So, and I was developing some of the plans for like, the burn-in tests and some of the other, kind of quality engineering and kind of systems engineering, kind of
Mhm.
all mushed into, also some, hardware stuff. So it was, what was fun about it, it was, a little bit of everything. And, you got to work with some really smart people who were very specific in what they could do. So, I was more of a generalist, kind of trying to, see
Mhm.
things to, completion.
Got it. Now, of course, this is back when everybody was still going to offices all the time. Can you describe the vibe of the office from the second you entered the building and kind of while you sat at your desk, what was going on?
Oh, see, that was kind of the cool part is like, um, this was in the day that, there was a certain point between, cubicles and the open office plan. And we had cubicles, and the vibe of the place was almost like a beehive. You could feel
Mm.
like just the buzz of things that people were doing, and everyone was excited. And you could feel this like hum of really smart people, really energized about the things that they were working on specifically that day. So it was a lot of like really cool environment to be around, and just listen to those extremely smart PhD people talk about something that they were really jazzed about. So it was a really great office environment.
Did you have a direct manager while you were there, or was it pretty low on the hierarchy while you
It
were
was a
there?
pretty flat organization structure because everyone, yeah, usually there was only like everyone kind of had their, fire line of which they were doing things. And then there was basically only like one level of management. So it was
Mm.
just like, the founders and then everyone below them. So it was really flat as far as that went. So, and I think that was pretty effective because, there really wasn't a whole lot of, oh, you got to get approval for this thing, or
Mhm.
you want to try a new thing with this that's going to cost, a few $1,000 or something else. It's just like, oh, okay, well, it's worth it, so go do it. You could get an answer immediately for all the things that you wanted to do for the business, as opposed to kind of going through the red tape of management and change requests and TPS reports or whatever.
What's the thing that you did at GTSI that you're most professionally proud of?
Building and leveraging commodity hardware to build a system that
Hmm.
for the time that for the price for performance was, I think, was pretty, you know pretty amazing.
Now, what was your most memorable day there?
uh I think my okay I think one of my most memorable days was when, so we were working at one of the buildings, and I, as an infrastructure engineer, I had to kind of be like a very intimate with every single part of that building.
Hmm.
And so one of the days that I had to be doing something with some radio equipment up on the roof. So we had to make a roof day and a roof work day, and it was just where we had to attach a bunch of things to the roof, and it was just a really cool day of working in the sun with a bunch of really cool people doing some really just fun radio stuff, and kind of one of those memorable days where it's like everything goes smoothly enough. I was in a completely new, I'd never been on the roof before, and so seeing a place from a new perspective, and then also getting some really cool work done with radios, it was a really cool thing to happen. And I would say one of the worst days is the day that I had to leave and quit.
Hmm. Al, what was the best perk at TGSI?
um The best perk was access to really smart people who were very humble. So I learned more about making electronics, things with metal, uh, cars, radio stuff. And I learned so much about each one of these things from myself and from my own
Hmm.
hobby projects because of these amazing people who were just humble and didn't want to, they wanted to share all this knowledge. They didn't care about, oh, you don't know these things, or, oh, they didn't have some kind of ego about like, oh, I'm trying to be the best about it. They were just
Hmm.
very amazingly, kind and humble about the knowledge that they had. And they were so smart. So I would say that was one of the best perks, is just being able to talk daily with just amazingly smart people who are very good at what they do.
And what was the most ridiculous thing the company ever did? Whether just a ridiculous budget for something, or
Or
yeah,
team outing.
team outing. Yeah.
Um, I would say some of the ridiculous things were some of how some pieces of hardware that would cost so much money seemed to just fall into our hands.
Huh.
And it would just be like, oh, it fell off of a truck. And I'm like, that costs half of a house. That doesn't just fall off of a truck. But okay, let's play with it. So,
Another benefit.
yeah, but also kind of ridiculous.
Was there? Are you insinuating something nefarious was going on, or just like there was a lot of serendipity at this company?
No, there was a lot of serendipity and there was a lot of like tech, and it wasn't really nefarious at all. It was just that, you know, people with connections to, other, they had friends that would work over at other places that were working on new interesting things, and so oh hey, can I borrow a demo unit for a week? And so it wasn't anything nefarious or anything like that. It was just it was just ridiculous. It just when it showed up and it was like the short story was like that, it was kind of like ridiculous, but it was very fun.
When did you, Al? When did you start? Did you have a good sense of kind of how the company was doing during your time there? Because of course you're building large enterprise solutions. I imagine there's not like we're seeing revenue go up month over month or anything like that. How did you get a sense of how the company was doing over your time there?
I mean, so that's the other thing that I would advise people to do, is that we all get kind of caught up
Hmm.
in how in our own work. And really, I think it's really important to every week or two talk to somebody who really knows all of the accounting, all the books, and just get an idea of how things are going. Because I mean, it seemed like everything was just on a rocket ship. We were working
Hmm.
so hard, we were getting units out, but really, I had no idea how we were doing, because we were hot. When you hire 70 more people and you only ship 50% more product, how can that work out unless you're getting some other
Hmm.
infusement of cash? So it's there's there was a lot of questions that I had that weren't answered, but I just continued to work thinking, oh, it's going to work out. And it didn't for me, but it did for a lot of them, and I'm glad for that. But it's just that you need to ask questions about how the company is doing, and be honest, because with yourself and your pocketbook, because you really we work for these places and we depend on them for our
Hmm.
financial well-being. And it's how it's run and how things are going is important to know. And the whole thing with the acquisition and other stuff, I felt like I was in a complete blind spot, and I felt like
Hmm.
I had put myself there just because I was working so hard.
Was the company culture sort of secretive, or do you think if you had asked those questions, would the founders have been receptive to giving you more information?
Everyone was very forthcoming until the acquisition.
How long had you been working there when there was first sort of talks of an acquisition?
Um, Almost 2 years.
Up until that point, I'm at a startup right now where we frequently talk about sort of that exit strategy, and other startups I've been to as well. There's often like this sort of culture of like where the founders are sort of hinting at, oh, maybe 3 years down the line we could go public, or 2 years down the line maybe we'll be big enough for someone to acquire us. up until in those first 2 years you were there, were there any sort of talks along those lines?
Nah, there was. See, we were scrappy little startup shooting for IPO.
Okay.
So up until when I had started, we were going to do our own thing and forge our way ahead.
And so then, how did you first start to hear these rumblings about being acquired?
Well, it first kind of started when we had this kind of big company meeting, and one of the we had grown and had a couple almost over three times as many people there as when I had first started. So a big company meeting, everyone and CEO and the founders and everyone is very happy to announce that we have this very big interest from a very respected player in our market. So, and we were going to entertain this because it would really help us build products faster. So that was
Hmm.
how it was kind of framed for us, was that, oh, here's a company that can basically solve a lot of our manufacturing problems with a giant war chest. So
Right. Maybe you don't have to go to Home Depot to buy the air conditioning unit anymore. Maybe you can afford like more equipment and things
exactly,
like that.
exactly,
So did initially wasn't there a lot of excitement within the company over that?
absolutely. We were like, great. This is this is going to solve a lot of our small little headaches, so that we can work on the high level problems, and then we can we'll have minions to do all of our bidding, and we can just all of the stuff that we don't like to do, we can just say, hey, shovel that over, and then we can work on fun stuff all the time now. So it was, I mean, it was there was a lot of excitement after the first announcement.
When did like the excitement start to lessen? When did people start to get more concerned?
As time progressed, basically, and a lack of information came out of the situation. So it's like, as more and more time passed and less information, new information about how things were going, you would expect, news about, such a big event disseminated to, us, of course, but, it just didn't happen. So the less and less information and the more and more time that passed seemed to, kind of be an ominous, stroke for everyone.
So was the concern then that just the acquisition wouldn't happen at all, and that then the company might be in trouble, or what you know? There often talks about maybe an acquisition is going to happen and it falls through. What was the concern about this potentially falling through?
There wasn't much concern about it falling through, because I mean, we were still making product and shipping product. So as far as we all knew, our balance sheet was fine, and the acquisition was just going to be pure gravy.
Hmm.
So kind of the fog of war that surrounded the entire acquisition that was going on kind of made it a very exactly, we didn't know what was going to happen. So, and it wasn't that we were afraid that, oh, we're all going to have our jobs shipped to South Korea or something like that. It's just that what where and how the structure of what would be working for, under what divisions we would be, and just kind of the specific, nuts and bolts of how, our company would be integrated into a much larger organization. So,
Right. So just a lot of uncertainty about what your role would look like.
right.
Got
And
it.
everyone
So
was very comfortable with, our startup, very flat organization. We were moving into a very hierarchical type of, big place.
right. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what kind of the future looks like. At what point did you start to think, well, maybe I should start looking to go elsewhere?
So, well, there was one kind of specific thing where there was a day where they brought over a bunch of people, and then they interviewed everybody.
So like someone from the potentially acquiring company came and interviewed current employees,
Yep.
and so it was almost like you were re-interviewing for your job then.
Yeah. And that's when I immediately felt like, oh no, something bad is going to happen to go down,
Hmm.
because it tingled all of my spidey senses.
Hmm.
And how long was this after the initial announcement?
I would say maybe 2.5, 3 months, somewhere in that time frame.
And so you get told like, oh, you have to sort of essentially re-interview for your job. What did your interview
Oh
go
no,
like?
they didn't say anything like that.
Like,
They just said,
what,
"Oh, the people from these people just want to come and talk to us." And
okay.
and that was how it was kind of framed too. It was like, "Oh, they just want to have a conversation with us." Okay,
Hmm.
great. Let's have a conversation. And then it's like, "This is an interview." Oh,
So,
what? Oh, okay.
so you get set up for a conversation with these folks, and then during the course of that conversation, that's when you start to feel like, oh, this is really an interview.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And so afterwards, did you talk to your like? How did your other colleagues feel about this?
They were like, well, we'll see what happens. With the startup mentality, there's almost kind
Mhm.
of like a, casino shoot for the moon type of mentality. So it's like, well, all my chips are down. Let's see what the see what the table does. So
Right, like let's let it ride. Like it may end badly, but I still wanted to see how it ends.
yeah, I got to see how it ends. I put in this
Mhm.
much time and effort, so I just got to see it through.
Okay,
Mhm.
but for you, you start to get a little anxious at this point, and
Yeah.
then what happened after that?
I just started. I went to a headhunting agency, and I mean, it was just because I didn't see anything good happening from that because I just if there's that, and what keyed me off to it was that the interviews, and it's just like, well, if there's gonna be an acquisition, then the management, they have all of the they could look at all of the paperwork. They can look at all the employment paperwork. They could look at my resume as I gave it to them, when I was hired. They can look at all of this stuff. Why do they need to interview me? So it's because there's a fundamental lack of trust between the people that are acquiring and the company that's being acquired. So I just sensed that lack of trust and that kind of nitpicking accounting that they were going to be doing by interviewing everybody was just just a very bad sign of things to come.
Got it. So you then start to actively after that sort of interview, you essentially start to actively look for a job elsewhere,
Yep.
and then I assume then because you're not still working there, 10 years later, you did eventually find something else, and is that at the point that you decided to leave?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got a really nice offer, and it was again close by, and doing it was kind of a change of a market, but not a change of a career or anything. So it was same stuff, but different market. I couldn't get a straight answer whether because when I got I got the offer, and then I went into my boss and I said, I have this offer. Can I be guaranteed that I'm going to have a job here?
After the acquisition.
After the acquisition, and in the
Hmm.
same capacity doing the stuff. And then basically my boss, one of the founders said, I have to be really honest with you, and that's I can't promise you anything. So I mean, I just kind of took that as thanks. I was sincere. Like, although it was bad news, I
Hmm.
sincerely thanked him for his honesty. It's just he again, and I hold everyone there in the highest regard because they were some very smart and honest people.
So when you went into that conversation with your manager or this co-founder, were you hoping that he would, if he had said like, "Oh yeah, don't worry, you'll have a job," would you have stayed?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I would have wanted to exactly. I was I was hedging my bet. I was trying to force the situation by looking for another job and trying to get an offer.
Got it. So almost like that was really just to so you'd have some leverage and that you could get a straight answer.
Yeah. And then if I didn't get a straight answer, then I would have my answer and then leave.
Yep. And so then that was then your final decision to leave.
Well, if there was any way for me to stay, I would have made the decision to stay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so then you decide then to move on. How did your coworkers react?
Everyone was really understanding. I mean, they knew because I mean, it had been months of this kind of uncertainty. So it's really hard to kind of a week of uncertainty, and I'm sure now with after a global pandemic that cannot be named, I'm sure we
Hmm.
all have a much more seasoned a few weeks of just having everything about your, your job and your future being, completely uncertain. I mean, it takes a toll on your, your mental state. So I
Mhm.
really just wanted to end the uncertainty.
Right. So by this point, it had been how long from the initial announcement?
It was about, yeah, between 3 and 5 months between the initial announcement and when I left.
Yeah, so that's quite a bit of time of not knowing sort of what your future is going to hold. And do you know, like, were any other colleagues, you mentioned they were all understanding, were other people also leaving at this time, or were the rest still deciding to try and stick it out?
Um, yeah, there were several people that went and stuck it out. There were several people that moved on. Yeah, and I mean, a great deal of the team, after the acquisition, made a great transition and have been, working there ever since. So, some made it, some didn't, and the ones that made it really, made out quite well.
Got it. And so when did the acquisition eventually happen? Like, how long after you left did it eventually get finalized?
It was very quickly after that, so it was within 2 weeks of my leaving.
Oh
So
wow. So
I don't want to say that I was the bellwether goat, but
and so I mean, looking back, would you have, knowing that it was only 2 weeks after, would you have stuck it out just to see what happened, or are you just glad that you got a job that you were happy with and you had that stability?
I got so lucky. I mean, I really, I'm glad I left when I did. I mean, I heard from friends about, after the acquisition that kind of, it wasn't so pretty. So at the moment
Hmm.
that I left it, everyone that I, had formed, really good friendships with was still there. And it was like, my last day there, although it was really hard, it was really great because we sat, we probably hung out and drank beer in the shop until midnight and played video games and just had a real nice last day together.
Right, where maybe after the acquisition, like where there were more kind of hard feelings about people who weren't brought on to the next company.
Yeah, there was some hard feelings about RSUs. There was some hard feelings about who went and who stayed, who didn't get to go, and not so great stories, but some great stories.
All right, so Al, if you could have gone back into a time machine when you're talking to these three different startups and you chose GTSI, would you have done anything differently? Would you have chosen one of the other two companies instead, or do you, knowing what you know now, would you have still gone to GTSI?
I would I would have, yeah, no regrets. I would have gone with GTSI in a heartbeat because it's it was a great story, and I learned an incredible amount. Ongoing saga of what happened with the founders and some of the stories in the media and some of the legal troubles have been really I've been reading, been able to read them with a level of insight that most people don't have. So I don't regret anything, and I would have taken that job again, and in a heartbeat. Even though it wasn't all sunshine and roses. It was some hard times, but I think some of the some of the conflict that we overcome, really kind of defines us as people.
Right, and no job that I've ever been to is all sunshine and roses, anyways.
That's why it's called work, right?
Excellent. Well, Al, thank you so much for joining us today and for telling us about your experiences.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and yeah, best of luck with your podcast. I really enjoy what you guys are doing, so keep up the great work, guys.
Wow, another amazing episode of Tales from the SaaS Graveyard. Stephen, what was your big takeaway from today's?
The thing that I really took away from Al's story is that kind of bittersweet ending of you think there's going to be this happy ending where, hey, we're about to be purchased by another company. This is going to be great for us. This is going to be really great for all of our wallets and for the company. We're going to really be able to make this company or these products that we're working on really grow and be successful. And then there was that awkward period of just kind of the purgatory of waiting, which I don't think is common usually with acquisitions. Usually, the way I understand acquisitions is the employees are the last people to know that an acquisition is actually going to happen, and they only know after it's finalized.
Right, because you don't
Um,
want to add, you don't want everyone getting anxious about this potential acquisition. So, and we see now, like he had a lot of anxiety about it. So it makes sense why you wouldn't want to let people know.
Indeed, and I think the very strange part is I think of this as very similar to the Bobs in Office Space, of where Al is kind of re-interviewing for his job again, which is a very awkward and strange situation to be in because you've been there at the start of the company to help build all these things. You know more about the company than the people interviewing you, and then all of a sudden you need to re-interview for your job, which is, I have to imagine, never a good feeling. I haven't been in that situation myself, but has to be very strange.
Right, it almost makes you feel like, well, of course they don't want me, because if they wanted me, they wouldn't make me go through this process again.
Exactly. What about you, Jake? What was your big takeaway from this episode?
Well, I also had a feeling of a cinematic experience when I was talking about being on the roof of the building, and it just reminded me of the scene in Shawshank Redemption when they get to like tar the roof, and at the end of the week they get to have some ice cold beers, and it's like the best week of their time in jail. And I just felt like the way that Al was talking about, like the camaraderie with everyone there, being outdoors, looking at all the other workers in the downtown, having to go to their jobs and to their offices and just being free, and it just felt like such a nice moment. And I think probably most of us in our jobs, a lot of it is drudgery, but there are every now and then those experiences where you're just hanging out with your colleagues and you have that nice moment of feeling connected with them, and like you're getting this job done. And then truly at the end you often have an ice cold beer as well. So that just really, it made me feel like that, that scene out of Shawshank Redemption. So we have the two extremes for Al,
Yeah,
going Office Space and Shawshank Redemption.
yeah. And I have to say, with the Shawshank Redemption story, I think the important thing to remember, although it wasn't necessarily a direct happy ending, it's kind of a mixed. It's very bittersweet in the sense that he built all these great relationships, and realistically, at startups, most likely they're going to go out of business. But the thing you can take with you is the relationships you build, which I think Al definitely did there, of kind of meeting all these really smart PhD people that you don't really get to interact with except at GTSI, kind of this unique experience, and truly making sure you got to meet these people, befriend these people, and of course they might not all work together at the same part now, but they always have these shared memories together of this awesome time when they're all working on the roof, solving very strange infrastructure technology problems.
Yeah, Stephen, before we talked about wanting the rule of three, and I thought of a third movie that kind of goes with Al's
Oh,
journey
perfect.
here, and that is in the movie Cocktail, the Tom Cruise classic. There's a line about how all things end badly, or else they would not end at all. And so I think Al's story sort of fits that bill. And with that, so concludes another episode of Tales from the SaaS Graveyard.